Hello, and welcome back to the Seeing Better podcast. I'm your host, Shelby Nix, and I have a new episode for you this week. I thought that I would do a recap of my trip to London, as that was also part of the European adventure that I did with Iceland as well. So last week I flew Friday night from LA to London, which is about 11 hours, and that was a red eye. So I tried to do my best to sleep, although that can always get interesting. I feel like there are two different types of people in the world, and those are people that can sleep very easily on flights, and then others who have a harder time. And I would say I'm part of the second camp. I did my absolute best, but sometimes it's just hard for me to get into a really deep sleep on the plane for a variety of reasons, but I did better than I thought I would. So that was a win. And then I was in London for a few days and flew to Iceland Monday night to Thursday with my friends, came back to London and spent a couple more days there. So I thought I would give you the insight on some of my favorite things to do in London because it's such an amazing city. I would say outside of the US, that's probably where I see myself going at some point. I've lived in a couple of cities outside of the country, which are amazing in their own ways, but I think there's just something really special about London. And it brings people in a centralized location. Flying in and out of London is so easy because there are basically flights to anywhere you want to go from London, which makes it very easy to travel around. But other than that, I would say the culture is just really interesting. There's a lot of hustle and bustle, but then there's a lot of moments within the city where you get to really feel at peace in a very interesting way, which I feel like is different for many US cities that I have visited. So I got in really late Saturday night into London and did my best, like I said, to sleep over the plane because I wanted to be refreshed and awake as much as possible. But sometimes you get what you get to a certain extent. I would say in hindsight, I wish I would have taken one of the dream waters that kind of look like a little 5-hour energy, except for they have the opposite effect of that. So I would have probably done something along that line or even taken a melatonin because while I generally don't take melatonin to sleep, I'm usually a pretty good sleeper at home. When I'm away and have a different environment, that can help me just put me to sleep a little bit easier. So I would have done that in hindsight, but I was dozing throughout the entire flight anyway. So I got home pretty late Saturday night and I took the tube. The tube is an amazing feature in London, and if you haven't gone to a major city before and used public transportation, although I'm sure many of you that are listening have, London is one of the easiest ways to get to know a metro system. Their tube lines are incredible. They go basically everywhere in London, everywhere you want to go. And it's in English, which is a plus because if you're going to another country in another language, that can sometimes get tricky. But in London, it's very easy. There's also plenty of people, so if you needed to ask, you could, and it's very affordable. So highly recommend taking the tube pretty much anywhere. There's no need to take Ubers unless you really just want to see above ground. And that leads me to my next London tip, which is to do the double-decker red buses that are iconic to London. They are such a great way to get around the city, but also be able to see different sights above ground and not have to lift a finger. So we always take the double-decker buses quite a bit, and when I have enough time, I like to do that just to see things from above ground, and that we did. So I honestly can't remember all the things that we did in London because we did so many things, but we started off that evening by going to a local pub, which is a must do wherever you're staying in London, which is just to go see the local pubs. And they have their own little personalities and different things that they're known for. Maybe they have pub trivia or live music. So that's always a fun thing to do when in London, when being anywhere or doing anything. But I think especially in London, where that is the key piece of their culture. So we started off by going to a local pub and we got a good night's sleep. And luckily I was able to adjust for the most part, although I did face some jet lag this time, which does happen occasionally. And the next day we decided to take advantage of the nice weather that we were having. So we went to Primrose Hill, which was not too far from my friend's flat. So we took the bus and just headed over to Primrose Hill, which is a really cute area with, like it sounds, a big lawn area where people just let their dogs off the leash, some cute cafes and coffee shops. And my friends went on a run. We met them there. And then we went to a little place called It's Bagels, I think it's called. And I believe it's a New Yorker that started it in London. And it's definitely not the real deal. I will be honest. It's not that New York bagel that we know and love, but it's probably the closest thing that you can get in London. So that was fun. So they got bagels and I got a little salad with chicken salad on top and some pickles, and it was delicious. So we ate that on Primrose Hill, and it has an amazing view and look out of the city. So you can really see all the tall buildings and the hills and all that kind of stuff. So it's just a beautiful thing to do when it's a little bit nicer out. And I love London because at this time, which was the first week of April, there were all of the beautiful trees, and I wasn't totally sure what the name of the trees were because we just kept seeing those really beautiful pink cherry blossom like trees, but I've actually learned that they are called magnolia trees, and they were out and popping everywhere. So that was just stunning. We did some wandering around after that, but when in London, the best thing to do is to have a loose plan, but be open to adjusting and pivoting because there are so many great things to do that it can almost be overwhelming. And for me, since my friends live there and I just have an affinity towards it, I know I'm going to be there in the future. So there was no need for me to try to cram in a bunch of things. I knew that I was going to be there again. So this trip really just sat back and went with the wind, and I think that fared really well. So on that same day after we had gotten our bagels, gotten our teas, whatever it is that we wanted, we went and walked in the park. And London is amazing because there are so many amazing parks. I want to say this one was Regent's Park, but I'm not totally sure. It's the one near the zoo. So we walked by the zoo and we saw a giraffe, and it was so nice outside, and I love just walking. So definitely bring a great pair of walking shoes with you when you're in London, or really in any city, but especially in London where there's so many beautiful places to walk around. So we did that, and we ended up coming back home. And some of my friends that live there in London are Italian, and they make the best food. So we ate at home, and we had some spaghetti with shrimp and pine nuts, and it was amazing. They always make the most delicious and simple foods that really just do the trick. So I'll give you a brief overview of the rest of the things that we ended up doing. On Monday, I want to say that we were on the bus quite a bit because then we ended up then packing up and going to the airport to fly to Iceland. So that was the other portion of the trip, which you can hear about in the previous episode of the podcast where I went all in depth about all things in Iceland. But when we came back to London, it really did feel like we were back home, so to speak, even though it wasn't my home. But it's just always nice to be there. It feels very welcoming. For the most part, it's safe. There are parts of London that are not as safe as others, so I would do a little bit of research when you're deciding where to stay, because my friends have had experiences that weren't always great depending on the area, but it seems as though if you're in a pretty good area, you have a good chance of staying safe. But as always, just stay alert. Make sure that you're not, saying where you're going on your destination in the tube all that loud, and keep your belongings near to you. But more or less, you're going to be just fine. And if you don't feel safe, try calling someone on your way. I like to do that if I ever feel like I'm unsafe, or if I'm just alone, I'll call my parents or somebody else. But by and large, you can do so much ground in London without having to do much work because you can take it from the bus. I just remembered what we did on Monday. So on Monday, we went to the river area, so the River Thames area, and in that area, you get to see basically everything that you want to see that is popular in London. So you'll see obviously the river, the London Eye, Buckingham Palace is in that area. So we saw Buckingham Palace for, whatever the fourth or fifth time, because I have been there a couple times, but it's always great to see. It's so different for us as Americans because we have some kind of mystique around the royal family. And this was also the time when Kate Middleton had gone, quote unquote, missing, or so to speak. So things have been extra topical. We got to see, yes, the mall area that's near Buckingham Palace. So the big walkways where people wait outside for different things like the Jubilee. And I know I'm probably missing a lot of the history. I would say at some point I'd love to do a full-on tour of London to hear more about the behind the scenes and the why and like how things all came to be. But this was just a self-led walking tour. And we went through the park area by Buckingham Palace, which, quick tip here, if you need to go to the bathroom in Hyde Park or just near Buckingham Palace or any of the major attractions, make sure you plan it out in advance, because I ended up having to go to the bathroom in this area and it was treacherous. I started to really panic. I'm not usually the person that waits till I really have to go to find a bathroom, but I knew I had to go to the bathroom and it ended up taking like 20 minutes to get to one. And then I kind of had to fake that I was going to the restaurant kind of thing. And it wasn't ideal, but I took care of it. So definitely make sure you're on top of that in that area because they are not very accessible. Anyways, we walked around some of the buildings around Buckingham Palace, and then we walked over to where the statues are across from Big Ben. And this was great because we got to see Big Ben in all its glory because it's been in construction for several years. I think pretty much all of the times previously that I've gone, it's been under construction. So we got to see it in broad daylight, and it was sunny that day, which was awesome because in London, usually it's not very sunny. And we got to see like down by Battersea, walk around. I have been to the Tate Modern before, which is in that area as well. If art is something that you're into, I highly recommend that one. It's more modern art, but they always have a great exhibition. And I think they actually had maybe some Warhols in there at this time, but I could be mistaken. So plenty to do in central London. It is a bit crazy, so know that when you go to these attractions, it's going to be very busy, but it is very worth it, and it's an amazing thing to see. So I highly recommend that you do that. They also have the double-decker buses that are the hop-on, hop-off version, which I actually did the first time that I went to London because I didn't have very many days there, and I wanted to see things from above ground. And I would say if that's your first time and you don't have a ton of days in London, but you want to maximize what you're seeing, I would highly recommend that. And then they also have like a recording so you can listen to somebody in a British accent explaining all the things to you, which is really fun. London is also known for its great museum footprint. So they have so many different museums, probably too many to even be able to accomplish in just one trip. But that's the exciting part, is that pretty much every time when I go, there's a new museum that we end up going to. This time was a little bit different, though, because that wasn't the main mission. But on Friday, we ended up kind of doing a bit of a jaunt on the double-decker bus and just kind of exploring where we were going and seeing things for the most part. We wanted to go to the British Museum and then also the Natural History Museum, which in hindsight was very ambitious for a shorter afternoon. The British Museum, I want to say, was beyond busy. It was incredibly busy. And I believe that one is one that you do have to pay for. Most of the others, I believe, are free. So if you want to see the British Museum, go ahead and try to get a ticket beforehand so then you don't have to wait in any lines and you have a spot. But like I said, I'm going to be there in the future as well. And I'm sure that there will be a rainy day that I need to explore. So I'm sure I'll get to see it at some point. Then we did go over to the Natural History Museum, which is similar to the Natural History Museum in New York, but they have mummies and they have Japanese art and a lot of Greek history and lots of amazing historical artifacts. There is a lot in there, so I would recommend that if you really want to do it, take your time, maybe even take half a day to explore it. And then I'm sure it's kind of the thing where you could always go back and probably see something new. That's especially true for the Louvre if you end up going to Paris at some point. Don't think you can do the Louvre in one day because it's probably never been done before. There's some statistic where it's like you can go to the Louvre 40 days in a row and still not see everything or something like that crazy. So just know, like, pick the ones that you really want to see, and then inevitably you'll hopefully go to it another time as well. So on Friday, we did some exploring. We went through Hyde Park as well. We saw Kensington Palace and the gardens around there, which is really beautiful. And we had lunch in Notting Hill. I had lunch at a place called Gold on recommendation by my friends, and it was very, very good. I highly recommend it. It was a little bit more upscale and a little bit pricey, but very worth it. Notting Hill is one of my absolute favorite areas in London, and if you've ever seen the movie Notting Hill, then you will understand why, but it's very beautiful and posh, and they have Portobello Market there as well on certain days, so you can see all of the vendors there too, but great place to just walk around, explore. And then I ended up meeting my friend at a place in Notting Hill called Libby's, and it's a gluten and dairy-free bakery, so I thought I would get a matcha, and they ended up having a lemon cake, which was delicious. Sometimes those places, you never know, it's good, sometimes it's not, but this one ended up being really, really good, so that was great. The driving in London is pretty crazy, so I don't know why you would, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend that you bike or drive or anything like that there, because the driving is absolutely crazy, and sometimes when you see the buses, you think that they're gonna, like, just crash into somebody else. They end up never doing it, but I don't recommend doing that by any means in London. It's just crazy. And also they drive on the other side of the road. But other than that, I mean, being in London is always amazing. And we walked around in the afternoon, and it was such nice weather. It was around like 50s, low 60s. So really perfect for walking outside, and no rain, which was another plus because usually there is some rain. We met our friends that night at Dishoom in Soho, which is our favorite restaurant, or one of our favorite restaurants in London. And Dishoom is basically I believe, Indian and Bangladeshi fusion restaurant. And you just have to go there to really experience it. It feels like you are in another country, but at the same time they have like the music that's in that style to like popular hits, and they have a ton of choice on their menu. So if you have certain dietary restrictions, they do a very good job at making sure that you can still select something. Their menu is pretty giant, but the flavors are just out of this world. There's nothing like it that I've found here in the US. There, of course, are Indian restaurants that are very good, but this one, it just has a different way about it entirely, and you have to go there if you're in London. Absolutely have to go to Dishoom. They have different locations, so you can decide where you want to go depending on where you're staying. I forgot that one of the days we also went to East London, which is kind of like the hip area, and we went and walked around the flower market, which was so much fun. We loved that. That was new for me, so I had never done that before, but so many great things to see, so many cute little shops and coffee shops and restaurants and things, and lots to do around there. But they also have a Dishoom in Shoreditch too, if you're in that area. They have one in Kensington. They have a ton of them around London. One thing I will say about Dishoom, though, is that there is usually a very long line, so just know that you're probably going to have to wait or get there very early if you want a spot. But by all means, it is incredibly worth it, so please check out Dishoom. You will not regret it. And then we ended up getting there a little bit too late to end up going to Dishoom, but we did have some drinks there. And then we went over to another place in Soho, which we hadn't originally intended, but ended up being really good, which was a pizza joint or chain called Pizza Pilgrims. And our friends said that it was good, and it was really, really good. I would say, like, if you're looking for a nice, fresh pizza in London, it was great. Not necessarily like something you couldn't find somewhere else, but definitely very good. Another restaurant that we did not end up going this time, but I do recommend is also, I believe, in central London near Piccadilly Circus, which is called Kiln. And I forget what kind of restaurant it is, but it's another kind of fusion restaurant, but really, really excellent food. Like super unique, something you'll never experience anywhere else. It's mostly bar seating, if I'm not mistaken, so a little bit more casual. But if you're looking to meet somebody there and have dinner with a friend, I would highly recommend going to Kiln as well. We did go to Chiltern Firehouse as well, or we didn't end up going to Chiltern Firehouse, but we went to the street that it's on, and my friend used to work there, so she was showing us around a little bit. And that is the very posh membership club in London that all of the stars go to, and she got to see a lot of people when she was working there as well. But very cute street to just kind of hang out. Feels more quiet and residential than some other areas. And we sat down and had a matcha there too. So just plenty of places to kind of hang out in London and chit chat with your friends, meet for a coffee or tea or whatever it is you want to do. And that's what I love about it, is that it doesn't feel like you have to be doing anything. Like you're going to end up having such great experiences no matter where you are. So back to Friday. Friday led up to one of the fun events that we also had planned, which was going to go see a show. And seeing a show in London is great for Americans because it ends up being cheaper than in New York. I don't know why, but it's like half the price. I think maybe it's just a little bit less, I'm going to use the word prestigious, but I think what the people there do is incredible, but maybe not as quote unquote prestigious in the theater world as in New York, but definitely very high quality. They always have a ton of shows playing, and they also have many of the ones that you know and love, like a Wicked or a Mamma Mia or Lion King. All of the latest and greatest are also there too. And last time I was in London, which was about 2 years ago, I went to go see Moulin Rouge, the musical. And I'm a big fan of the movie, and I know some of my friends are as well. And I knew that they were going to just love this one. We were going to either go to that one or to Wicked because, oddly enough, many of them had not seen Wicked before, which was just shocking. But we went to go see Moulin Rouge, and we had a opportunity to see it for £25, which is probably like as cheap as you can probably get to go see a show there. And it was standing, which was different, but in this case it worked out because the style of the show is basically the story that's in the Baz Luhrmann movie Moulin Rouge, which is one of my favorites. Very odd and strange movie, but a great one nonetheless. And they basically have the story modeled off of that movie, and then they also integrate modern music into it as well. And it's hard to explain, but basically they just take you through the story through music, and it's a ton of fun. There's a bunch of dancing and lots of great laughs. So if you get a chance to see that one, I highly, highly recommend it. It's one of the best I've ever seen. And basically that takes us to Saturday, which was our last day, and we were leaving that day, and so it was a perfect day to go over to Hampstead Heath. And Hampstead Heath is another big lawn type area where people let their dogs roam free. That's so different for us in America, because that I just don't know anywhere where you can just let your dogs off leash everywhere. But that's a really fun place to go. It's so relaxing. It's very calming. They have like a pond there. They have swans. They always have like a carnival or something happening. And there's just a ton of families. It's super safe and very relaxing. People, I guess in the summer, will end up going in the ponds. I don't know if apparently they're safe. I don't know. Or they'll go in watercolor on the hill and just kind of hang out. So if you want to grab a coffee and walk around and just have a leisurely weekend day, I would say that's a great thing to do. It's a bit more posh of an area as well, as if I'm not mistaken. So I heard that Harry Styles bought 2 houses next to each other there, and Taylor Swift has a house, Dua Lipa has a house, I think. So it's a little bit more upscale, but it also has like a very cute neighborhoody vibe, and there's a ton of greenery and flowers and just very cozy vibes that I love. So highly recommend Hampstead Heath. And I was telling my friends as well about a movie that was pretty low budge, or at least it seemed to be because I'd never heard about it before. But I saw it on Netflix a couple of years ago, and it was with Diane Keaton, and it was called Hampstead. I don't know if it's still on there. I hope it is. And it was basically in the styles of a Nancy Meyers movie, but it wasn't a Nancy Meyers movie, or at least I don't think it was. And basically, it was about this lady that lived in Hampstead Heath, and she was an American, and her husband was from there, and her husband passed away. And basically, there's a journey of how she kind of gives back to the community, more or less. But very cute movie, and gives you a great depiction of what Hampstead Heath is like if you're curious. But that's one of my top recommendations, because Hampstead Heath is just one of those places that, like, when I think of London, I always think of that super fondly. And that's basically where we then ended. So we did a ton of things in London, despite the fact that we were mainly going to Europe to go to Iceland, but always a great time in London. There's so many things to do. My friends that live there absolutely love it. And if you're thinking about going somewhere abroad and you've never been to London before, I don't know why you haven't, but you absolutely should. It's very accessible and easy for Americans to kind of integrate in other places where English is not the native language. It can get a little bit more tough sometimes, but London is a no-brainer. It's super easy. People say that the food in England isn't the best, and while I don't disagree, I think sometimes it can be pretty heavy and fried. I do think that there are some amazing restaurants in London, like Kiln, Dishoom, and many, many others, but you just have to look out for them. Nopi is another great restaurant as well. Gold is another great restaurant. You really can't go wrong. There's so many great places. So highly recommend London and all things UK. I'm a big fan. It makes you feel like you're in Ted Lasso or something. And I will absolutely be back. So with that being said, that's all of my trip recap for both Iceland and London, and I will have more to come later this year, but right now I'm just trying to get back into the swing of things and trying to chill for a while. So I will be doing that from now until probably the end of the summer. I'm really excited for some more warmer weather. It's pretty gloomy here today, and it's supposed to rain, so I've been kind of just having a really chill day. And this episode series has given me a bit of a spark of inspiration. So I think next time I record a podcast episode, I probably will do like my travel tips and tricks, because there are so many things that I do to help me make this easier, especially when traveling alone, which can be surprisingly quite challenging at times because you only have yourself to count on. So I'm going to do, I think, that episode next time when I get all my tips together. But thank you so much for listening to another episode. I hope you're doing well, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.